Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. We have an amazing show tonight. We have someone sort of outside of our usual realm of crime, blood, and guts, but she's a lot prettier than most of our guests, too. And of course, with me tonight is my co host, straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. How you doing tonight, Phil?
I'm doing pretty good, Billy. How about you?
I'm doing great. And we have Chrissie Mayer, who is, as you can't see it as well, but she has red hair.
Thank
She's
you.
the,
Yeah.
she's the 21st century Lucille Ball. And
Yeah.
Chrissy's a stand-up comic. She's an actress. She's a broadcaster. She's one of the hardest working artists that I know. She's you think that the bread truck is on strike because she's working so hard.
I'm getting ready. I'm getting ready in case it does.
That's right. She's getting ready for the apocalypse, and she's
I gotta hoard beans. I gotta get my buckets of food ready for when the shit goes down.
That's right. And she's got opinions that you will not believe. But before we get to that, we're going to go to the Police Off the Cuff song, and we'll be right back.
It's a show with two retired detectives that were in the thick of New York crime, fast and hectic. They got some stories and some jokes, even an interview with the most popular folks. Off the cuff, one episode just ain't enough. Get a little laughter and an interview too. It's maybe the best thing you can do.
Welcome back, folks. And tonight our special guest is Chrissie Mayer, who I said before is a broadcaster, stand-up comic. She actually used to be a swimmer, too, back in her college days.
Diver, yeah.
A diver. Oh, my God. So she can do it all. She's an athlete. So, Chrissie, one of the things that people, and I also want to mention, Chrissie has a podcast, and she's got 50,000 subscribers. And she's yeah, you do. You do.
YouTube. Right.
Yeah, you're kicking ass. And something that's no small thing, because I talked to Tomas Delgado, who's another comic, and he does the tours of New York. And he tells me many comics try to do podcasts, and many of them fail. Because we're struggling. We're around 24, between 24 and 25. And I'm always whining about it. He goes, "Hey, Bill, don't whine." He goes, "You're doing good. So many guys can't get anyone." And I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right,
I think
Chrissie, you're at 50,000.
I think a big part of it is consistency, and a lot of comics are not very disciplined. I think particularly the ones who have never worked in like the regular 9-to-5 working world, like if they've never had a regular job, and I think a lot of comics it's so easy for them to just not be accountable to anybody. And it's a lot of work, as you do your show. And it's a lot to coordinate, and you have to all this stuff. No one really teaches you about sound and lighting. It's all stuff that you kind of have to like do trial and error and like do your own research.
And Chrissie, you're right. The research on knowing what you're talking about, because if you go on the air and you have no clue about the person who you're interviewing, you look like a fool.
True. Or you just like, when that happens, you just have to nod and be like, "Wow, that's so interesting. Can you just tell me more about?" And then like just say literally anything, and then hopefully an hour goes by.
Chrissie, I'm just going to let our fans know that you do a show called The Wet Spot, and you sort of you interview a lot of porn stars.
People get nervous when they hear the title of that show. Yes, it is one of my many shows. It's a sex, dating, relationship advice show. 7:00 on Mondays on Compound Media. I have had this show since the summer of 2019. This actually was my first podcast, really. And I try to make it like old school Howard Stern before he sold out. So we have comics on, we have adult film stars on, like random chicks on OnlyFans, like whoever, you know what I mean? Like the creep who lingers outside the studio, I'll invite him up. Like really, it's a real hodgepodge of people. and we usually just drink at Sullivan's at the bar across the street, you know, like before and after the show. And it's fun. And we just got a motor bunny sent to the studio, which is basically like a vibrating saddle with a remote control. So we've been having fun with
You know,
that.
Chrissy, I was actually on that show with 5 female porn stars, and
Are
I'm
you
sure
still
I'm pretty-
sore?
yeah, I'm pretty sure they knew that I wasn't a porn star, you know.
Hey, you never know. They come in all shapes and sizes. Who knows? You could have been a stunt dick, as they say.
Yeah.
Which
You
is,
know,
which is when you're off camera and it's just you just see it like coming in off the side, you know, like
I know that Phil and I could never get away with doing a show and interviewing porn stars. I don't think we could get away with
you
that.
could
Oh,
just
why not?
wear
Let's give it a
all
shot.
you need is a media pass and just wear it all the time and people think you're legitimate.
Phil, what do you think? You think you could get away with that?
Oh, I think we could have a lot of fun with something like that. I don't know how much the audience would like it, but I think we could pull that off for sure. I mean, listen, let's face it. We, you know, being in the police business, we're no stranger to talking about dirty stuff and dirty
Women of the
things.
night. You've dealt with women of the night.
Oh yeah,
before.
lots
Yeah,
of times.
of course. Prostitutes, hookers, drug addicts, you name it, we've dealt with it. So, yeah, I think we could have a lot of fun with that. That might be something we should consider in the future, Bill.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll go on Chrissy's show and do it.
Definitely. Whenever you
could-
guys want. Yeah.
We
it'd be
could
fun.
do that.
Sounds
You
like
know,
an
Chrissy,
idea.
I just want to mention also to our fans, most people, they think of stand-up comics and you know, people that are in broadcasting, that they're mostly of like the left-wing liberal persuasion, but you happen not to be, and that can cause you some problems in the comedic world, and you know, in this cancel culture world. And you know, we're going to get to it. We're going to talk about the Joe Rogan thing, but you've had your own problems with that, haven't you?
For sure. And I actually started out as a total left winger. I graduated college. I was like a women's studies minor, even like communications degree. But I was like, you know what I need to study is women doing shit. And it was all my friends at the time. I was in the Students for Social Justice Club in college. Like I was driving down to do protests with them in vans. So I was like all in. I graduated fully hating men. Like I had what I thought everything it took to become like a really successful female comic. I was like, I hated men. I had a chip on my shoulder, daddy issues. I should have made it big.
What school did you go to, Chrissy?
Fairfield in Connecticut.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was good. Like the whole idea of, when I got attracted to comedy was I had an internship at Late Night with Conan when he was still in the city. So I would commute into New York from Connecticut, my senior year of college, and got like college credit. So I was able to figure out how to do that, which was helpful because the internships during the summer were almost impossible to get at the time, because that's when all the executives and everyone who works there, that's when their kids want to do the internships. And it's like they get in no problem. But during the school year, they're limited to, you know, whoever's kind of like goes to school nearby. So that's when I kind of first was like, oh, I really want to be around comedians. Like that's when I made the switch from wanting to be a news reporter when I grow up to like being involved with comedy somehow. And then ended up going into improv for like 5 years, and then did a one-woman show, and then started doing stand-up. But I was like fully still very liberal, very much a lefty, but absolutely like classically liberal. Probably still in some ways I would still consider myself classically liberal, but it wasn't until like my sense of humor was always kind of like politically incorrect. I would always like, no matter who my friends were, make like kind of like racist, misogynist, like whatever politically incorrect jokes. Like that's just what comedians do. And for 6 years, I was hosting a show at the Stonewall Inn. And, you know, if you put all of that together, like a girl in her 20s doing stand up in New York City, you know, kind of lefty minded at a gay club, you know what I mean? Like that's a certain type of personality right there. And I noticed when I went from hosting a show at the Stonewall Inn to having my own podcast on Compound Media, even though you look at the wet spot, I just described it, you'd hear that, you'd be like, oh, you could, you know, some people would consider that, oh, it's sex positive. We welcome all sexualities. We do all this crazy shit, right? I can brand it in kind of like a woke way. I can say, oh, look at that. All types of people are welcome, of course. But the fact that I went from Stonewall to Compound Media changed very much my sort of like public the perception of me from other comedians, because Compound Media is considered, oh, this like super right-wing network, and Anthony Cumia is a Republican or whatever people think of him. People think he's, very ultra right or whatever. So of course anyone associated has to have the exact same views. And there was a little bit of like bad press because like Gavin McInnes used to have a show on there, and people are very confused about Gavin McInnes because they're like, oh, that's the guy who started the Proud Boys, but then they don't know the rest of the story is like the Proud Boys were started as a joke, and then they eventually would escort speakers like Ann Coulter and Ben Shapiro to like, a CPAC or whatever university they were speaking at, so they wouldn't like get attacked, so they could like physically get to their gigs. And then they sort of over time became the answer to Antifa, and like, would get into fights and stuff, mostly out of like self-defense, but obviously the media like really twisted their reputation. So there were all these kind of factors that were adding up to be like, oh, Compound Media is like, you're the enemy or something. But like I hadn't changed. My sense of humor hadn't changed. Like I still loved the gays, still do. Like it sounds horrible that I even have to say that. But the fact that I went from hosting a monthly show at a famous gay bar to doing a weekly podcast at Compound Media changed what a lot of comics thought of me. And the kind of in crowd in comedy, and this, Bill, is like very left leaning, very very woke.
Well, Chrissie, I want to say,
yeah.
And I haven't done comedy since the summer, and the whole COVID thing made us not be able to perform a lot unless we did it on Zoom, online, and stuff. But one of the things that sort of really hurt me during this whole anti-police thing over the last, the war on cops, was so many comics that I knew really MF to the police.
Wow.
And
they don't even know what the fuck they're talking about either.
Right, exactly. Most of them are living in their parents' basements and they're making minimum wage at a Starbucks. And I really felt like I said, I can't wait to come back so I can grab that little 23-year-old asshole and him. Because they have no point. No, but I mean, they have no point of reference.
They have no.
They don't. They were all, F the police, F this, F that.
Being told their opinions are all like pre-chewed, pre-digested. They just like, it's very hard for most people to like think for themselves. And, more people are kind of more like pack animals, I guess, than others. And you would think with stand-up comics, like you're pursuing something that not a lot of people are doing. You have to be a little bit like crazy and outside the box to pursue stand-up. You would think that would mean like, oh, we're all free thinkers, we're all like fight the power. And now it's kind of like the corporations and like woke comedians they've joined the power. They're echoing all the same talking points. And
how about the guy that got kicked off the stage at Columbia University?
Who's that?
There was a comic. He was Asian or Indian. Okay. And he was doing, they said, don't do this joke. He did the joke and they turned his mic off.
Man.
And
then they went up. Patel?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and then they went up to him and said, look, you don't have to finish your set. We'll pay you, but just leave. Damn. I mean, that's so pathetic.
That sucks for them. And I'm actually really glad he still did the joke, because fuck them. That's really wild.
Really. You know, I think about how, like, when this whole defund the police thing started. Now, if you're a young person in your 20s, whether you're a comedian, college student, defund the police. It's like, get rid of the police, get rid of the cops. They're the ones that are always breaking my chops every time I got a joint in my mouth, or if I'm going to do this or that. So it sounded interesting. It sounded, maybe like something that they would want. But in reality, you can't defund the police. Even bad guys, criminals in the street were saying, what are you, crazy? You got to have cops. You got to have, if a burglar breaks into your house in the middle of the night, you want somebody to show up. So when they, I don't think the young people really grasped it, thought about it. It was this whole movement that was going on after George Floyd, the riots and everything. Yeah,
let's brainwashed. They're
brainwashed. They jumped right in. They jumped right in.
Cops are just indiscriminately shooting black people. The media was actually able to convince many people that is what you guys do. And then God forbid you bring in real statistics of who does the crime.
Nothing could be further from the truth on that. And they proved it by showing the statistics. But
but nobody wants
matter. The horse was out of the barn. Everybody was already on board the train to defund the police. It really didn't matter at that point. You know?
The media does such a good job of like taking control of like the collective feelings. And now feelings have become more important than like facts, than thinking for yourself. yourself than actually talking to actual cops and detectives and like seeing what it's really like out there. Yeah, the media really did a number on people. And for me, my moment of like, what the fuck is all this George Floyd stuff was Black Square Day on Instagram. I don't know if you guys were aware of this, or you're probably like fucking just grown men living your lives, and this probably eluded you, but like there was this day during the summer, like everyone had to post a black square in support of Black Lives Matter or George Floyd or whatever it was. And I was like, I didn't do it. I was like, I feel like I'm being bullied to post a dumb fucking black square just to prove to Instagram that I'm not racist. This is the dumbest thing ever. And I didn't do it. And like, that was like a moment for me. I was like, oh man, like I just started to like zoom out and look at everything that was going on.
Chrissie, we're going to segue into
Oh Lord,
these two hippies. That's Joni Mitchell on the screen and Neil Young. Keep on rocking in the free world. Except if I disagree with you, then I'm going to cancel you. And here he is. These are the people that in the 60s were the biggest shit stirrers, the biggest like proponents of free speech. And then we're going to move right into this. They're trying to shut down
what
Joe
happened
Rogan.
to them? What happened? When did they get?
I don't know. Maybe they smoked too much weed, but they're like now they want to shut down free speech. And look, Spotify and Joe Rogan. Spotify would not give a shit about Joe Rogan's free speech, except that they're paying him $200 million. Mm-hmm. So if they didn't have that amount of money invested in him, they'd be like, we agree, we better shut him off,
Spotify is very much way more concerned, and their investments point to that they are their future. They very much want to be like the top of the podcast game. You can look at like their investments over the years and picking up certain like absorbing sort of other podcast companies. You can tell that, and there's more money to be made in podcasts, and the data that you get from podcast listeners is more valuable than the data that you get from who listens to what music. And like every time you play a song, you have to pay out royalties, whereas like podcasts, you pay more upfront, but you have the potential to earn more over time. And like Rogan is making 3 hours of brand new content every day, or like at least 5 times a week or whatever. What musician is doing that? And you can tell a lot more. Like, let's say if people listen to the Robert Malone episode of Joe Rogan, well, then they know a heck of a lot more about demographics from someone who listens to that episode than if someone listens
Chrissie,
to
just let our audience know who Robert Malone is. He's an MD. He's an expert on the virus.
Yes, he is one of the guys who helped to invent the mRNA vaccine, or the mRNA injections that they're using now. And he has been so heavily censored and basically canceled by the science community for having a different message than the narrative that they're intent on pushing. And it's like, he's one of them. Dr. Judy Mikovits, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, they're all part of this group of like scientists and doctors who have been like heavily censored, pushed out, canceled, had their social media platforms deleted because they have different opinions on how to handle a pandemic and what vaccines maybe are or aren't. And
well, remember when Lynyrd Skynyrd said, I hope Neil Young will remember Southern men don't heat him around anymore. Because he wrote that song, cool. Southern Man. Remember that?
Maybe
I love Neil Young's music, but I don't like his opinions. I don't like people when they push their bullshit.
These boomer musicians, they get a taste of like all the success and they get all this money from, and then they just kind of fall in line and behave, and they'd rather choose comfort over than like freedom and art and the message. They're like, they want to keep their cozy lifestyles going. So why would they risk losing that income?
But why does social media afraid of someone having a conversation on a show and they immediately attacking what he says as not being true? And I know the Washington Post came out against that Dr. Malone. And I didn't read the whole article. I read some of the article. They were trying to refute what some of the scientific things he said, and they really didn't. No, they really didn't. They just had different opinions about it,
Very much about control. Like, just a small example. And like, we've all been talking about this stuff the last 2 years. Like, overall, it's good to like make sure you're getting vitamin D, vitamin C, take your echinacea, make sure you're exercising, right? Like, everyone generally knows that that's always been good advice, but that's been particularly good advice in the last 2 years, you know, and if you have extra weight, you just now's as good a time as any to try and lose it. Now they're trying to take what is like known as common sense and be like, well, we're not necessarily like going to support weight loss. Like I don't know if it was even Jen Psaki who a reporter straight up asked her, like, are you going to support weight loss as like a good preventative measure? And she just wouldn't. She refused to. And that's not Jen Psaki right there. That's me.
Who is that redhead on the screen?
That was me. It was pre-pandemic, Chrissy. Look at that. Woo. The point is that, you know, the powers.
Oh, Chrissy, I have to show this one. This must have been.
Oh yeah, that
must have been on the Wet Spot show.
That was like, I'm getting actually new headshots taken tomorrow because I'm like, it's been a couple years. That is when I was like, oh, my jacket doesn't fit. Let's just roll with it. So the point is that like the powers that be don't want to accept certain like common sense approaches to health. I think the powers that be, like we all know, our news is so heavily funded by big pharma, and they would like, and of course the government wants to be our daddy, right? They don't want anybody to think for ourselves. They don't want families to rely on each other. They don't want communities to rely on each other. They want you to depend on the government for everything. And the same, I think, applies to like big pharma. They don't want you finding your own, like they don't want you to have your own medical freedom. They don't want you to like look into different forms of care. They certainly don't want you to heal yourself. So rather, like they'd rather
They
censor.
want you dependent. They want you dependent.
They want you to take a pill for everything instead of like, yeah, just lose the last 20 pounds. Big fucking deal. Your clothes will look better. Everything will be better.
Jen Psaki wouldn't even commit to saying, you know, if you lose weight, you're going to be in a better, you'll be in a better position if you do, God forbid, get the virus. And the reason I think that she took that position is that they're afraid to say something that might go counter to what Dr. Fauci's saying. Dr. Fauci has been proven to be wrong, lied many times. So I think they're trying to stay in that lane. Anything that he says, anything that could be counter to what he's saying, oh no, they're going to stay far away from that, you know.
And they're so safe that they actually sound insane. Like they refute common sense. That's how safe they're being, and how they don't want to step on anybody's toes because they know who pays their salaries.
Look what they did with hydroxychloroquine. The minute that Trump said that it was thought to be something that would treat the virus, they just poo-pooed it. And I know a family member that had very early on, was to the hospital 2 times, this close to going on a respirator, was given the hydroxychloroquine, within hours stopped coughing, and within 2 days the fever went down to normal. So I know. And now there's also another component of that. Hydroxychloroquine is 60 cents a pill. You need 2 doses for
been around forever.
5 days.
Yeah.
So it's a $6 prescription as opposed to these other drugs that are $60. So that might have been part of it, a financial component of it. But the minute that Trump said it, the media was just so anti-Trump. Anything he said, anything he did, that they just poo-pooed it. And I don't know.
They called it fish tank cleaner right away.
Yeah, listen, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I don't know if it does work or it doesn't work. I know of a relative that took it and it seems to have worked. So, but why would we so quickly go away from that and say, and Fauci came out right away and said, oh, there's no proof that it works. But meanwhile, they came from studies with, I think it was in Israel or other countries, where it showed promise in certain early on. If you were severely ill with it, it didn't seem to help. But there's just so many things that they the media really wanted to take control of. And I don't know who behind the media is. You could go into the big names in media and say that they're responsible, working with the Democratic Party, but who knows? It seems like they just don't want to admit defeat, so to speak, or they don't want to admit that they were wrong, and
they want to keep doubling down. Yeah, they'll never admit to being wrong.
Yeah.
Well, Chrissy, did you watch the episode where Joe Rogan interviewed Dr. Sanjay Gupta?
Yes, and you called him out. Yeah. You're like, you said that I had a horse pace. Like,
right, I was taking ivermectin, and he said that worked for me. And he goes, "It's not a horse tranquilizer. I was given it by a doctor, by an MD, and it works." And CNN lied and said it was this and said it was that. And he goes, "What do you say about that?" Of course, he didn't want to go against.
And you know what it is? It's like the powers that be, they always they'll never, and he had him by the balls in that episode. There's no way Gupta could get out from under that because he was right. He called him out on it. They totally lied about him. And what do? They hire some goons to pull up that N-word reel. And then that's the news about Joe Rogan. And it buries this other shit that he was right about, calling out CNN about, about lying about him. But what comes up more recently in the news is that whole like N-word video scandal, and that's what these people do. That's what celebrities do. They'll never refute, the news. They'll just make more news to go on top of it. I wonder if
I gave you the whole screen, and I felt that you were going to come up with some
yeah,
really
you know what?
good stuff, and then you just stopped talking.
I figure you're just like, take it away.
I was giving you the show.
Well, I didn't know if you guys fell out of the stream, which happens with me a lot. Like I just get kicked out.
I could see it in her face that she was thinking that. She was almost about to stop talking, but that happens a lot with the guests unexpectedly. But I got to point out something about this cancel culture, because it seems like, when they get on a specific individual, that Joe Rogan doesn't seem to be.
These are great graphics, Bill. Man,
I have to be ready for all of this stuff, Like if Phil talks about a veal cutlet parmesan hero, I don't have a picture of one here. I should have. I didn't know
you should. For crying out loud. That's one of my
up.
favorite things. You're supposed to have that. But the point I was trying to make is that Joe Rogan is considered a libertarian leaning in his politics. He supports same-sex marriage, gay rights, women's rights, recreational drug use, universal health care, universal basic income. And but he also supports the Second Amendment and gun rights. And, for them to go after a guy that doesn't seem to be so far to the right means like they will hold nobody sacred. If they have an agenda, somebody says one little thing out of line that they don't agree with, boom, you're canceled. And I don't agree with the cancel culture the whole thing really is not, I don't agree with it. We had recently 2 cops killed in New York City. And then a day after the first funeral, there was a woman that went on, I think it was on Twitter or Instagram, talking about how, this cop died. But she wound up losing a job over it. Now, I don't think she should have lost the job. I think she was an asshole. I think she was wrong. I think she was a moron. She was stupid for what she did. But that really shouldn't affect what she does for an everyday living. She has to support children or family or just
a cop as well.
No, she worked for some production company or something.
Yeah, she was in the
She's
media
complaining
business.
about the crowds in the city. It shut the whole city down for this cop that was killed, and she said he probably didn't do his job well.
Wow, that's never gonna fly.
Yeah, he was probably killed for being guilty of doing something wrong. She made some really stupid, and it was about traffic or not being able to cross the street that she needed to get across or whatever. She was inconvenienced and she was sounding off, and she sounded like an asshole, which she was. But the thing is, now I know coming from me, retired NYPD detective, doesn't sound right, but I don't believe that she should lose a job over that. Maybe a slap upside the head, but not to lose a job. And that goes across the board. So if we're not going to say we don't believe in the cancel culture, it has to apply to everyone. And the same thing with freedom of speech. You want to have freedom of speech for some things, but not for others. And it's really, really unfair. And it seems like the liberals of yesterday were the ones that were the loudest voices speaking for freedom of speech and would be against cancel culture 20 years ago. But today, they're the ones that are most silent when it comes to this cancel culture nonsense. I mean, just think about it. The president of the United States, Donald Trump, was taken off Twitter and Facebook and will never be able to get back on those platforms. That's really, really, I mean, did he say things that were so bad that he should be taken off forever? That's really not in the realm of what they're even, pretending to be, because that's what they're doing. They're pretending to be, this high and mighty. We're going to cancel because of this or that. They're full of shit. It's not about that. It's about, they just want to have a left-leaning agenda, and he was part of the right. So they just, they took him off the platform.
Trump really did a good job of popping the bubble on fake news. Like he said it over and over. He woke up so many people, truly, and they were just like, wow, this guy's too powerful. He's got too much influence. He's getting way too many people to look skeptically on the corporations and news and basically like, the rhinos and like the establishment politicians, and like they're never gonna be able to undo that. And they're like, we can't control this guy at all. We're just gonna kick him off.
Chrissy, even the liberal Bible, the New York Times, they lie all the time. I mean, one of the biggest issues right now confronting the crime problem in the city is this bail reform thing. And I've read numerous times writers say there's no evidence that bail reform and the rise in crime have any correlation.
Oh,
Meanwhile, the NYPD comes out every day with statistical analysis on that exact topic, saying bail reform's killing this city. And the Times is like, there's no evidence that, what are you waiting for?
They're going to wait for the study that comes out 10 years from now. That's what they're waiting for. But
yeah.
the crime is through the roof. Every category of violent crime is up anywhere from 60, 70, or 80%. So, I mean, you don't need that much, to figure out that this has really got a direct result. And, all the other policies that de Blasio, the former mayor of New York City, enacted that really destroyed New York City. I mean, we have hope for this new mayor, Eric Adams, who's a former police officer, and we're just, hoping that he doesn't have the Democrats pulling his strings too much to stop him from, maybe turning around the city. We really want the city to turn around again. It's ridiculous that you can't get onto a subway without, interrupting some two homeless people having sex or
shooting up. Yeah,
shooting up.
Crackhead
and in fact, they get their crack pipes from the Democratic Party. They just issued free crack pipes. it's unbelievable. You can't make this shit up. Folks,
they're giving out works.
If you want to go on, see, this is Chrissie's website, www.chrissiemayer.com. On February 26th, Chrissie is at Levittown Governor's Comedy Club with
Saturday.
The comedians of the Compound. Mm-hmm. On March 17th, she's in Raleigh, North Carolina at the Good Nights Comedy Club. On March 19th, she's in Savannah, Georgia at the Wormhole. I don't know if I'd want to go to that club, but that's the club she's at. And on 4/22, April 22nd, April 23rd, she's in Atlantic City Comedy Club with the comedians of the Compound. Folks,
I'll be in Tampa on March 20th at
That's right. I missed that one. Side Splitters.
It's okay. Side Splitters at the Grove the very next day on March 20th. So come on out. Would love to see you guys if you live in any of those areas.
That's good because a lot of people will be going down to Florida in the next few months, and just go on Chrissie's website and copy down her date. She's going to be down in the South. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. If you're not subscribed to our channel, I think you're crazy, but go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell. We have a Patreon with 3 different levels if you'd like to support us. We also have a YouTube membership that with 5 different levels, and you can see the folks in the font with the green font are part of our YouTube family.
Hey, hold that mug up closer. Let's see what this mug is all about.
Oh, here's another one, the Police Off the Cuff.
Dipped in butter. What?
We won't go into that because that got us in trouble once.
Is that about your balls?
Yes, that's right. That's
she
right.
knows about that.
I didn't want to say it out loud again.
I'm just putting 2 and 2 together. What else could you dip in butter?
That's true.
There's a little story behind that. We used to say that if a guy had like a career that he didn't do a lot and everybody was helping him, that his what was dipped in butter. But that's what.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he had a special dipped in butter thing, So let's get a little bit more into the Joe Rogan thing. I think another thing about Joe Rogan is that he intimidates the mainstream media because he's killing them in ratings, just destroying them. And I've even heard that fat guy with the big head on CNN, Brian Seltzer, him like complaining like, oh, a podcaster, like, oh, he can't know what he's talking about because he's a podcaster. He's killing you, destroying your ratings. He's also in 10 times better physical shape than you. Maybe if you had guns like this guy.
He's not like Joe Rogan is like the most attractive man on the planet. And like Stelter and him are both bald guys. But like Joe Rogan is like he doesn't really have an agenda, and I think it was Dave Smith who did an episode of Rogan who said, look, like you're just not lying to people, and that's enough at this point,
That's enough to get you canceled.
He just don't lie, and it's like people do not trust legacy media anymore. It's done. So, and people are getting their news more from podcasts and content creator types.
It's crazy.
The bottom line is that this whole the COVID-19 pandemic, it's uncharted territory. Nobody really knew. And instead of being able to say, all right, we're going to try this, maybe it didn't work, we're going to try that. No, they couldn't. They could never admit, that's what I think brought down Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo, had he turned around and said, listen, we thought we were making the right move by putting the people back in the nursing homes. It was a horrible mistake. People died. If he would have took a little bit of responsibility, he'd probably still be governor. He may have outlived that sex.
Phil, I don't think so.
Let him keep grabbing asses.
Exactly.
Never come out.
He thought he was grabbing the dough coming out of the pizza oven, and he wasn't.
Yeah. There were old allegations, and maybe it never would have came out had this other stuff with the nursing home scandal and hiding half the numbers of the people that died in nursing homes.
Oh, that was
maybe
bad.
that's what made people come forward. So
they really lied.
It's uncharted territories. And I'm going to bring up Fauci again, another one. He could just say, listen, we're not sure. We think the masks work, but they're not working. Instead, they just insist on things. They change. They go back and forth. And what it does is it shows their credibility to be down, and people don't trust, and they're not going to listen to somebody like that when they lie. You can see when someone's lying to your face. So if you're lied to, why would you listen to the person going forward? So that's the big problem.
So many options. Yeah.
Big credibility problem with that.
Chrissy, I don't know if you go to the gym and all, but I go to the gym. And there's still people spraying the shit out of things, and you're like, so they told us a year ago that you can't get it from a surface; it's airborne. So stop spraying this shit all over the place.
How about the lady walking the dog yesterday in the park? I saw a lady with this double mask, 2 masks on. She's out in the park, nobody near her. And she's wearing 2 masks. So there are some people
from her dog. So
she might.
Some people are taking it to the max. Chrissy, I had a question for you. You started talking about how when you came out of college that you were a lefty. What was the point in your life that that you started to see the light? That I call myself a common sense conservative, and I think that's really got a lot to do with it. But was there a point? What made you start to look at the other side?
It was honestly like hanging around a lot of guys. Like a lot of my friends are male comics. A big part of it was my boyfriend, who was already like firmly a libertarian, and listening to people like Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder. For me, a big part of it was like reading Jordan Peterson, which like he's not particularly political, but he's a big proponent of taking responsibility for your own life. Another big piece of this was there was another female stand-up comic girl who basically like tried to cancel me because I did an impression of her, and like spun this whole narrative that like she came onto Compound Media. She ended up walking off a show, not my show, somebody else's show, because there was a discussion about cultural appropriation of Halloween costumes, like something truly inane. Like, and the fans were like, oh, hey, if she's a comedian, she should be able to stay and like A, defend her point, or B, be funny about it. She didn't either. She just walked off. And then I think that same week I walked in, did an impression of her, like put a dark wig on. And she was like, oh my God, you're encouraging people to threaten me. You're like she claimed that she had these rape threats, and like it was basically like a little bit of a cancellation, like coming from within what I thought was fellow female comedy community. And I realized like, oh wow, like there's no loyalty anywhere here. The second somebody thinks they have something to gain from putting you down, they'll do it.
Chrissy, the comedy community is first of all, they're ridiculous. I remember one time I was talking about to the young comics. I was saying, you guys you're all fucking socialists. You're ridiculous. You were taught by your college, by these left-wing professors, and one kid goes, we should get comprehensive health care. I said, dude, you need a comprehensive job before you start talking about comprehensive anything. Well, how old are you? You're 18 years old. Shut up. You've been already taught to go on the dole, and you haven't even worked yet,
And that's the thing. It's like the media does a really good job of they just want their vote, right? They're not there to teach people the reality of socialism and of communism. And these people are so young, they haven't met anybody who's lived in any of these countries where it's like ruined their lives. And they see, oh, I'm going to get shit for free. I don't have to work as hard. And then you get all this attention from claiming your victim status because of like your sexuality or your ethnicity or whatever.
And Chrissy, all these young comics wanted us to pay for their college loans. I go, I paid for my college loans. I'm not paying for
like,
yours too, you know?
Yeah. Wait for your grandmother to die. You'll pay off the rest of it then. Relax, like you're going to be all right. And part of that though is, folks like my age and younger, like not wanting to admit, part of, I think, why a lot of people are like, oh, I need to get my college for free is like, they're not willing to admit that it was a bad investment, that it was 4 years. And, sometimes people spend over $100K on getting these degrees that do not prepare them for the real world or employment, or they're not able to get jobs, and they're certainly not able to make back like what they spent on their degrees. So I think that's what's part of this allure of like, oh, free college, because it's like it's truly not paying off anymore.
There was a comic that used to do a whole bit. He goes, I'm working as, I forget, he had some menial bullshit job. And he goes, and I owe $150,000 for my college. And he went to a SUNY. I go, how did you possibly borrow $150,000 going to a SUNY? You must have been drinking and smoking weed every single night. Are you kidding me?
Or he changed majors and it took him 6 years, or he got a master's degree. Like that can all ratchet up the price. Yeah, it's crazy.
Unless you're going into a specialty field, it doesn't seem like the right position to take is, going into 4 years of debt, because that's what it really is. You wind up with a lot of debt. And like you said, they're not preparing you for the real world. The real world right now is, people with hands-on skills. And, if you're going to go into the, into the social media business and you're going to go into the computer business, I get it. There might be some skills you have to learn there, but I don't think you need a 4-year degree to be able to sit at a keyboard and do stuff on the internet or in social media.
No. Yeah, like I'm embarrassed. It's like my parents pushed me to get this degree in communications. What? So I could answer phones, so I could be a receptionist in New York City working for assholes for 10 years. Like, I don't know. I just think like you should take a long, hard look at what your skills are, what you really want to do.
Except, Chrissy, everyone says be a plumber. And that's a nasty, nasty job. They make a lot of money, but it's a nasty job. I would never want to be a plumber.
Trades are really, really in demand right now, like electricians, plumbers, obviously, like you said, and anything in the construction industry. There's just not a lot of people that are able to do those jobs. And plumbers, they get sick money. They like $500 an hour or something like that. Wow. Almost as much as surgeons, So, and I don't think colleges are teaching too much about plumbing or electrical, those trade schools. But I guess, one of the other things I saw on TV, welders, there's a tremendous demand for welders. And I know it's not a pretty job, but they're making buku bucks.
I heard stand-up comics are making big coin.
Right. Yeah,
if you bring 400 people to your show, you're gonna make about 100 for the night.
Oh God, yeah.
That's a struggle, I'm sure, and you and Bill can also speak about that. I'm sure that.
Well, Chrissy's on the way to making it. I'm still. No, I mean I sort of segued out of it. I'm not saying I'll never get back on stage, but the podcast takes a lot of time, takes a lot of planning, and I felt that I could give more to this if I didn't. Look, I enjoy performing, but I hated the hustle of comedy. You know what I mean? I'm not 22 years old.
I'm running around.
Yeah, like going to mics and then kissing people's asses to get on a show. The comedy cliques. They take over whole clubs and they just book their friends. It's sickening, So I was like, something, let me try something different. And again, I'm not saying I'll never get back on stage. It's just that I didn't enjoy the hustle. And, maybe if I had started out when I was 22 years old and not 57, maybe I would have, I'm not saying I'm 57 now.
No, of course not.
I'm older than that now, but I started when I was 57. That was a little bit late to start, I think.
Yeah. I think if you told me, it's going to be 10 years and you're going to make this much money, I think I would have been like, yeah, maybe not.
Maybe I won't try this.
Bill, you're making a good point, because Bill and I met on the set of a show called The Perfect Murder back in 2016. A friend of ours who's the executive producer of the show asked us to come on and play detectives. And I had never did it. Bill had did it a couple of times. But again, I was, sort of tinkering with possibly maybe doing some acting and stuff. And then I did some other things, and I saw how, people that don't have a SAG card are treated. And, I had this young 22-year-old kid tell me, hey, don't stand there. All the actors got to stand over here. And then,
God.
the executive producer and the guy who owned the company were like, Phil, come over here with us. And then the guy was like, oh, sorry, sir.
Well, Phil, that's if you do extra work, you can't eat the food.
Exactly.
I would never do extra work just because of that,
Yeah. And listen, being in our position, we're retired from the job. We did all of these things to now it's like going back to square one at 21 years old, like when I got on the job, and I just couldn't do that. I mean, there was obviously a possibility I could have did some work and made some money off it, but it just, I always told people, like I was telling the guy, Willie DeMayo that we had on, that's filming the series Gravesend, he offered me a part to, do a walkout, play an FBI agent. I said, Billy, listen, unless it's a major thing, I don't want to be an extra. And I thanked him for it. It was very nice of him to even offer it to me, but there's a lot of grind to it. And, at this stage of my life, and Bill, you were just basically saying the same thing, to go through that hustle and bustle and kiss ass. It's really, it's just
it's not happening.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break. Phil, you ready for your commercial read?
Sure. Joe Murray, attorney at law. Have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of legal counsel in the New York area?
Ooh.
Need a victim's advocate? Well, Joe Murray is your man. He's not only an experienced trial attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He literally knows both sides of the fence. His website is jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702. Or you could reach Joe at his email at joe@jmurray-law.com.
While we're doing a little shout outs, Chrissie, this is your album cover. And tell us about it.
So this album cover, I was like, I wanted to do, my album is it's almost about half, like probably 20 minutes of material about January 6th. And the rest of it is material from like the last 10 years of doing stand up. And I was at January 6th and I got into some trouble when I was on the Megyn Kelly podcast. I said, oh, it's pretty chill, like from my perspective, because the side of the building I was on is pretty freaking chill. It's just families, flags, people singing, praying, like, it's not at all. It was mostly not like what you saw on the media. Maybe a few people on one side of a building at one point experienced that, but like for most people, and there was up to 2 million of us there, we didn't experience that. And it is very similar to a lot of these, like the trucker convoys, the videos that we see, where just people are coming together and they're patriots and they care about their country. So when I decided that I would do the album like January 6th themed, I was like, I really want cover art that shows like overly wholesome, overly fun, like everyone's having a great time. It's colorful. Like we got a little bit of the Antifa there on the right side. Just a little, like, it's like a Where's Waldo. And then in this group of people are actually a couple of my friends who were also there that day, like covering the events as well, like I was. So, and then Bryson Gray is also actually, I had him drawn in there, and he's like a big MAGA rapper. He had like his Let's Go Brandon song, I think was like, it was number one for like a long time, but he's just doing great. And yeah, I wanted it to be like very wholesome looking and like the opposite of how the media depicts the day.
One of the things I totally I'm against, of course, which most people are, of what happened on January 6th. I found it to be horrendous that people went in there and I don't believe it was an insurrection. I just think it was a lot of people that wanted to prove a point. But I think the other side, the Democrats, are missing the point that a police station in Portland was attacked 100 nights in a row. They were shooting rockets at it. They were putting chains on the doors, setting it on fire. They let Antifa and Black Lives Matter do billions of dollars worth of damage. In the riots, 40 people died. And we're supposed to say January 6th was 9/11? They're out of their mind. These people are out of their mind.
Bill, I got to point out something. I'm glad you brought it up. I think, listen, there was a bunch of knuckleheads that were in that crowd. And then there was some professional agitators that were egging people on.
And they know exactly how to egg people on. Yeah.
And there's rumor that there were FBI informants present that were also egging people on and different things like that. But I'm not going to get into that. The thing I want to get into is this. For a good 3 months of the summer previous to January 6th, whatever you want to call it, the insurrection, whatever, there was riots going on and there was zero accountability. People were being arrested at these protests and riots, and they were being let out a couple hours later. People watched this. We were glued to the news media. They saw this and they saw, wow, you can get away with this. You can do this. Why not go into the Capitol? And I think that's really what sparked a lot of the people to take that step and go through the doors. Now, listen, there were definitely knuckleheads there. When you start breaking windows and you start attacking police officers, that's off limits. I'm sorry. You need to be arrested and you need to be held accountable. But I think a lot of the people that just walked through the doors after those doors were opened, and some of the video shows that the officers basically escorted them in, those people should not be put in the same category as the guy who broke the door or was throwing tear gas or whatever they were doing, you know, the real agitators of January 6th. And again, I think the mindset was people probably wouldn't have done it if they didn't see what they saw for the last year or 6 months, whatever it was, where these riots were going on after George Floyd, and no one was being held accountable. They were allowed to loot. They were allowed to pillage, burn buildings. And like you said, the federal building was attacked for, I don't know how many days in a row.
No, the police station, the police station in Portland was attacked 100 nights in a row.
Okay. That was the police station. There was also a federal building that was also attacked. And the police weren't doing anything about it. And they actually were going to give the police station up to the rioters at one point.
That's
Thank
unbelievable.
God they didn't. I mean, just so many things. So my point is the mindset was, well, you can get away with it because it's been happening. So now we want to voice our opinion. And I think that's why they, violated the grounds of the Capitol and may have gone inside. And again, they're going to figure this out one day, and they're going to see that they have a guy on tape who was actually telling people, come on, the day before, we got to go in. We're going into the Capitol, and he hasn't been arrested. They know his name. They know his
Ray
whereabouts.
Epps.
Yep, Ray Epps. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So I'm glad you brought that up. So you're obviously on top of that.
My favorite news report of all time on the riots was CNN saying they're mostly peaceful, and behind them was like the biggest fire I've ever. A raging fire, and they're saying it's mostly peaceful. I was just like, this is actually hilarious.
And we also listened to our politicians like Pelosi and AOC. And God, like Maxine, was it Walters or Waters?
Maxine Waters, yeah.
They're all saying that protests are not supposed to be peaceful, that you're supposed to make your voice heard. They're supposed to make people uncomfortable, like that. It basically like glorifying everything, all the damage that BLM had done. All these people are getting bailed out of jail, zero consequence. And then a fraction of that happens on January 6th, and everyone gets, hundreds of people get thrown in jail. You get labeled insurrectionists. People get fired from their jobs.
And they put a fence around the Capitol for what, 6 months?
Well, yeah, part of that was because they were like, I don't know, they were probably worried. They're like, oh, people know this is an illegitimate government. Like, they're going to be pissed.
Unbelievable. That Maxine Waters, she was the one during the Trump administration that she was egging people on. If you see somebody from the cabinet, you get in their face.
Yeah.
Everybody forgot about that. And it happened to some of the people. The spokesperson, I can't.
The press secretary for Trump. They kicked her out of a restaurant. Yeah,
Huckabee's daughter. They were forced out of a restaurant. I mean, it was just Sarah Sanders Huckabee, I believe is her name, and they were forced out of a restaurant. And several of them have been, people got in their faces, went to their houses, did, destruction of property in front of their houses and stuff. They forgot about that very conveniently before January 6th, and now they don't want to talk about it. And again, listen, I'm not for anybody throwing a rock during a protest. Then you're not a protester anymore. You're a rioter. You break a bottle, you throw a rock, or you start a fire. You're now a rioter, and you need to be arrested. That's just the fact. But again, Chrissie is saying how she was there, and she didn't see any of that. She was in an area where there were people just voicing their opinion and having a peaceful.
She was in the Kumbaya area where they were holding hands.
Mostly peaceful section. Yeah.
Did you get contacted by the FBI or anything like that?
No, but my girlfriend who was with me did, and she's smart. She knew her rights. She opened the door with her gun on her hip. She didn't say anything. She didn't let him in. She was like, "No thanks, bye." So, and she lives
Because
out.
I think what they did is they took all cell phone records from the area and they were systematically going through those and paying visits to people, and probably not in a very aggressive way, but they were knocking on the door. Were you there? And we want to talk to you about it. And your girlfriend probably did the right thing by slamming the door in their face.
Yeah,
Well,
and
they
I'd welcome them. I'd be like, you know what, come to a show. I'll give you free tickets. I'll get you a drink. Like anybody, even currently, anybody listening to this, any feds, you know, I welcome you. I'll get you a beer. Let's hang out.
they'll only come in if they get in for free. That's for sure. You know.
Yeah.
You know, Chrissie, I just want to.
Go ahead.
I want to steer it towards. We want to talk a little bit about crime, since that's what our show is about, the real crime stories. And you know, the thing with New York City is in the last 8 years, we probably had the biggest buffoon of a mayor in the history of the United States. And what he did to New York City in 8 years is something that you'd almost have to try to do. He was handed a city with a surplus budget. He was handed a city with the lowest crime rates of a major city in the world, and he turned it into a shithole in 8 years. Any thoughts on that?
You're talking about de Blasio?
Yeah.
Oh God. You know what? Really, it was a moment for me just watching him. I think it was when we were ringing in 2021 and watching de Blasio just like dancing in a totally empty Times Square with his wife. I just was like, man, this guy's really out of touch. And just from talking to Larry Sharp, who I think is actually running for, I think he's running for governor of New York. And I think like right now he just announced his candidacy, but he was telling me like, yeah, de Blasio like fully believes in everything he does. He truly, like, I don't know if he's like being puppeteered by the globalists or what, or if he gets some sort of extra credit for the things he does to bring down the city. But I'm like, there's no way this guy is like, you know, doing this out of the goodness of his heart. Like, it's just, there must be some malicious, you know, like reason for how he's been running the city. It's just been like disaster after disaster, like so tone deaf.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And you know, the thing now is that this new Governor Hochul, who was appointed after Cuomo was stepped down, when they mentioned to her, you got to do something about bail reform, she's like Jen Psaki when she doesn't want to answer a question. Mm-hmm. She wants no part of that, you know. And then you have a Manhattan DA who received $1 million from George Soros for his campaign. So there's a plan. They have a master plan.
Yeah.
And finally, the other side is pushing back. Finally, you young comics, there's no free rides. All right. There's no comprehensive health care. There's no comprehensive anything unless you get a comprehensive job.
No free lattes unless you
That's right. So your Starbucks job, you'd be working it for 20 years.
Well, New York City is in a really unique spot because like everyone who could afford to and could move out did move out over the last 2 years. And what you're left with now is people who, for job reason or family reason, are taking care of an elderly parent. They don't want to pull their kids out of school. They cannot leave the city. And it's almost like, yeah, we're coming out of 2 years of telling people what to do and them largely listening and still listening. Like 95% of people walking around the streets of New York City still wearing one mask, double mask for no reason. So it's like you're left with a group of people that are so obedient. I think the powers that be are like, ooh, what else can we get them to do? Like what else can we get going?
Take this shovel.
Yeah. Oh, we're not gonna have cars on certain streets. What else can we do? Yeah.
You know what I think woke everybody up though was this latest Omicron variant. Now we had already been a year and a half, almost close to 2 years into the pandemic, and I don't give a shit what you did. Christmas time, everybody I knew got it or had it since then, and it's just unbelievable. You could wear 2 masks, be vaccinated, you still got it. So I think that might have turned the page a little bit and woke people up. And you know, the mask thing is, I think it's just ridiculous at this point. You know, maybe in close quarters or something like that. But they say that the virus itself is so small, the particles, that the mask does absolutely nothing when you breathe in. So it only had
said that out the gate. Out the gate, he said the masks really don't do anything, and then he had to backpedal because then he didn't want regular people taking them away from like surgeons and I don't know, all the first responder type people. But then honestly, they kept the mask thing going because it's a form of control. It's honestly technically an immune system suppressant. It's not doing any good. And we've all heard the horror stories and what it does to kids when they're the group that's the least at risk. It's really just like kind of child abuse at this point.
Absolutely.
It is wild. Just people have not got message. And when you have people who are already like germophobic or like they just need to control, all the Karens we've been seeing, the people having meltdowns in stores, the
Karens, I
viral
love
videos,
that.
like these are all people who like had these kind of issues already, and the pandemic like really brought out the worst in a lot of people. It kind of was like make or break for a lot of people, for a lot of relationships. Yeah, it was really, a lot of people did not stand the test of time here.
No, that's for sure.
Speaking of Karens, if you put Karens in YouTube, you'll laugh your ass off. There's a lot of funny Karen videos on there.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Chrissie, I don't want to keep you here more than an hour. We're coming up on an hour. I just want to let everyone know at the bottom of the screen, that's Chrissie's website, www.chrissiemaya.com. You can go on there and find out where she's performing next. It lists all her radio shows, her podcasts. Please go on her podcast. It's really funny. I feel like we could talk for a couple of more hours, but I know she's the hardest working comic podcaster, former diver. She's doing it all, and I don't want to keep you here longer than an hour.
Thanks, Bill. And I don't have an OnlyFans, so stop asking.
Phil, final words.
Yeah.
Final words. Chrissie, it was so great to meet you on the podcast tonight. Thank you for coming on. I think that a lot of what you said was common sense stuff, and I agree with it. We got to just use our heads here. This is not difficult. It's uncharted territory. This cancel culture stuff. We talked about Joe Rogan. Some of it is really just absurd that they accused him of lying and making up stuff, and it just wasn't true, and they're canceling doctors and everything. Everybody got to take a step back and take a deep breath and start thinking about freedom of speech. That's what this country is built on. And that's it. Thank you very much again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Chrissie, final words. You get to read the Declaration of Independence.
Final words. I mean, if you have an extra set of handcuffs you want to mail me, I won't turn them down.
That's your final words. That was brilliant. We love that. So, guys, this is Police Off the Cuff. I hope you guys had fun. We certainly had fun with Chrissie Maya. Chrissie, I wish you all the best of luck. You're one of the hardest working people I know, and you're one of the nicest people in the comedy business.
Thanks,
and if I come back again, I'd love to be on a show with you.
Of course.
By that time you may have blown up so much, you'll be like, Cannon, get him out of here.
I won't answer your texts.
That's right. You may do that. All right, guys, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Stay safe, everybody.
One episode just ain't enough.